I absolutely love the Hitman franchise. However, I got into this series very late, my first game being Hitman Absolution on the Xbox 360. So I had no previous reference of what to expect, just as I was getting into gaming quite heavily during the 7th generation and also growing up. I found that I absolutely loved stealth-based games, just making my way through the environment, taking out people silently or not touching anyone at all, and just being able to complete my objective without anyone ever noticing that I was there. Now, this particular gameplay loop isn't really for everyone. Some people get rather frustrated at the trial and error style of gameplay, but I just absolutely love playing games this way. To me, it's kind of like actively figuring out a puzzle, trying to get through the environment as quietly as possible, trying to take out enemies and hide their bodies so that no one detects that you're there. And the Hitman franchise has kind of cemented itself as being one of the most influential games in the industry. I didn't know what to really expect when I booted up Hitman Blood Money. I know that this particular game is a favorite amongst fans of the franchise, but it is an older game in the franchise. It's a cross-generation game at that, available on both 6th and 7th gen systems. So I just wasn't sure what to expect when it came to the gameplay, especially with all the enhancements that the later games brought to the series and the fine controls and all that. I have to say that I was really surprised with Hitman Blood Money. This game in particular has a really great range of levels and a pretty interesting story at that. This game is actually extremely impressive as well. The AI in this game behaves in this kind of almost realistic manner. You can kind of interact with them in different ways, and they're very aware of their surroundings. But there's some later missions in this game that I didn't capture, unfortunately, that just showcase these large levels. There's this particular level in New Orleans where you basically get to explore the city during Mardi Gras, and it's just this insane crowd of people, and you really just feel like you're kind of carving your way through this massive event trying to complete your objective. And it's even more difficult when you have all these different eyes on you trying to take out your targets as quietly and stealthily as possible. The levels in particular are just so well designed here. They all have their own unique identity, their own flavor and art direction, and they just really feel like actual lived-in spaces, like someone actually modeled the interiors and the exteriors of these levels to painstaking accuracy to their actual realistic counterparts. There's this ongoing narrative kind of going on in the background. There's this journalist who's kind of been tracking your movements and is very close to discovering basically all these assassinations and linking them to Agent 47 and this special organization that actually, hires the hitman and all that stuff. And the game kind of takes place in these flashback moments. You're listening to this journalist interview this particular older guy who claims that basically he's killed Agent 47. And so you're playing the events leading up to that sequence, and it's just really cool. It's very cinematically done, very stylistic as well, and it's just this kind of ongoing mystery, and you get bits and pieces as you play through the game, and it's just quite fascinating. And although the game came out at this point 20 years ago, I won't spoil the ending sequence, but it just has this amazing twist in the narrative that you just don't see coming, and you just get this chance to kind of do your one last final mission. And it's just, it goes out with a bang. I absolutely love the final moments in this game. Definitely very surprising, and it's completely in your hands as well. You get to kind of control the situation, and really cinematically done, and I think a great ending for this particular version of the character. Now, visually, we're watching the Xbox 360 version, and I actually think this game holds up rather well. Yes, it is pretty telling of the era. Again, this was a cross-generation 6th and 7th gen title, but in terms of the 7th generation, this was actually another game that was released exclusively for the Xbox 360. Keep in mind that this was the middle of 2006, so we were a couple months before the release of the PlayStation 3 at the time, but this game would eventually find its way to that platform via a Hitman HD collection. So yes, you can get it on basically all versions there, and I believe it's even been remastered in some form or another for the newer 8th generation systems. But I have to say that for visual presentation on the Xbox 360, again, keeping in mind that this was a next generation showcase at the time, I think they did a really good job actually detailing all the different environments, making sure that they feel like lived-in spaces, and in particular, they really utilized the crowd technology. You can see that this was a much earlier iteration of what the later Hitman games would have when it came to the large crowds, the density of those crowds and all the people, especially other games in the series like Hitman Absolution, which would follow release 6 years later, and then of course the modern Hitman games today. You can really see that they were playing with the crowd technology in this game in particular, and there's all these people just walking around. You really just get this sense that you're in this large crowd and you have to kind of move your way around people and find a way to take out your targets very quietly. So it just presents you with these very interesting scenarios and these very interesting locations, and it's kind of like a puzzle. You have to kind of work your way to solve and see what is the easiest, most efficient way I can take down my target. I think the length of the game is actually pretty good as well. It took me around 12 to 15 hours to beat this game. So depending on your playstyle and just your familiarity with everything, I was playing this game for the first time, so I wanted to explore the levels. I had to kind of learn what I could and couldn't interact with. Coming from the newer Hitman games, I had to, adjust and get acclimated to the controls. So yeah, there were a ton of times where I was kind of restarting from checkpoints, restarting levels, trying to kind of look at what was the most efficient way to get through and kill my target, and kind of do things in a much more fashionable and professional state. As is signature with the Hitman franchise, you do get ratings at the end of each level, and this can unlock additional items for you to use in your later missions. So there is actually incentive there to keep kind of retrying and to do things in a very efficient and quiet way when it comes to taking down your targets. Now let's talk a little bit more about the controls. This was the one thing I was really concerned about, especially coming from the later Hitman games and how well those games actually play. What was Hitman Blood Money going to be like, and was this game going to hold up as well to what I was kind of used to with the newer Hitman games? I was actually pleasantly surprised here. Now, Agent 47 moves with a bit more of a quicker pace than what I was used to, He kind of runs through the environment, he moves a little bit quicker than what I was kind of expecting, but this kind of helps as well because when situations came up where I needed to kind of act quickly, I was able to move with this sort of pacing that would allow me to kind of get behind cover or just get to a civilian that saw me in the area. So I was able to kind of react a little bit more quickly. I have to say that when it comes to the controls, probably the thing that hasn't aged well is the use of gadgets. You have to kind of select these gadgets individually, and you can't map them to a certain button at all. And so when it comes to you running up to your enemy, where in the later Hitman games you can kind of toggle between kind of on the fly, you can't really do that in this game. So you have to kind of navigate through the menus, select what you want to select, and kind of do it in that way. And there are certain things that Agent 47 can and can't do when it comes to in comparison with the later games in the franchise. But I do think overall that once I got adjusted to the way that this game played, I just played it in a slightly different pace to what I normally play the other Hitman games. You're still doing the same basic things, right? You're still exploring the levels, you're still kind of studying your target, seeing how they move, where they go, what are the things you can interact with. So all that is still very much present here in the older Hitman games. It's just that when it comes to the efficiency of actually taking action, there's a little bit more time that you need to give yourself when you're kind of reacting to certain situations and what you're doing. Probably by most people's standards, they would just say that this game hasn't aged well, but I just want to make a point here that it's not unplayable by any stretch of the imagination. It just takes a little bit longer for you to actually do some of the things that you could easily do in the later games today. So I was actually very happy that I got to play Hitman Blood Money here. I got into the franchise with Absolution, which I know for a lot of people, they thought that was quite a departure from the rest of the other Hitman games. And that game kind of prompted IO Interactive to kind of reboot the franchise into what it is today, and a successful trilogy that they had with the World of Assassination games. Which, speaking of, by the way, they just combined all three of those games into one major release for the new generation of systems. So if you haven't picked up any of the later games, you can just get the Hitman World of Assassination game, and it comes with basically all the levels and DLC from the past three Hitman games of the last generation and also this gen as well. Blood Money for me is just an instant classic. I think it's still a great time even all these years later, and I think keeping in mind that this is one of the premier titles for the next generation, the 360 was only on the market for 6 months. I think this game does a really good job showcasing some nice detail in the levels. They definitely did a lot when it comes to the artificial intelligence and just the amount of of people on screen and the stuff that you can interact with. You can see some of the polygonal edges on Agent 47's bald head, but I think that this game still kind of holds up decently well. Again, you can tell what everything is in the environment. There's good detail around it, and the lighting is also quite moody and atmospheric. So everything that's here kind of comes together in just this well-polished package that I think still holds up rather decently well today. Again, just give yourself some time to acclimate to the older control scheme, but you'll be good to go after that, and you'll be having a lot of fun with this, especially if you like this style of games. Guys, I know that this game is, again, a fan favorite for a lot of people when it comes to this franchise, so I'm very interested to hear what you guys particularly loved about Blood Money, especially those who had played it way back when it was new in 2006. It was great playing the game after all these years, and I'm just so thankful that the franchise got back on its feet. We got a great trilogy of games, and honestly, I just am looking forward to what IO Interactive does with the new James Bond game that they're making. For me, it's just an instant dream come true, because there are videos where I've kind of talked about IO Interactive being the perfect developer for the James Bond franchise, and I just cannot wait for them to kind of take all the lessons they've learned in Hitman games and put that into just this really incredible and hopefully action-packed James Bond game with so much variability in terms of how you can approach your missions and interact with everything. It's just going to be amazing, so I cannot wait for the day that that gets fully announced and comes out. Thank you all so much for joining me for this reminiscing video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. Looking forward to hearing what you all say in the comments, and until next time, have a good one.